Familiarize yourself with the manual supplied. The manuals are actually downloaded into the chassis also, so you can take a laptop and hook right up to it. If you want to read them, talk to your truck committee or your chiefs and get copies. Do not modify any equipment unless you have authorization from the factory. This is important. I've had multiple fire departments, and it's sad to say this, mount equipment on the back wall over the wheel wells. So they're drilling a hole in to mount a bracket, they come back out and there's black plastic on the drill bit. They just put a hole in their water tank. I mean, you don't know the distance between that back wall and that water tank there. So if you're going to mount equipment and you're unsure, it's always safe just to call us first. Let us help you before you start drilling and mounting equipment to make sure you're not going to cause any issues. Keep ignition sources away from flammable objects. That's kind of a no-brainer. And then keeping the vehicle clean, both inside and outside. You guys should, from looking at the trucks out there, it looks like you guys take good care of your vehicles as it is. Safety harnesses. This truck came with new safety harnesses, 4 of them. I'll show you where they're at on the truck, how to wear them and use them. The biggest thing is if the aerial is ever out of the cradle or you're going up in the air, you must have the harness on and latched into one of the anchor points. I will show you the anchor points today that are in the bucket so you know where to properly latch the carabiner. Positioning of the vehicle. I'm not going to tell you how you should drive or position this vehicle, but when you're pulling up to a scene, you should always look for overhead obstructions, trees, power poles, etc. that are going to be in your way to get your job done. And if you can set up on corners of buildings and stay out of the collapse zones, obviously that's a smart thing to do. When setting up on the ground, make sure, always try to set up on either tar or cement. Sometimes you have gravel lots, you know, if it's a heavily used gravel lot by big trucks, it should be okay, but you have a minimum of 75 PSI is what you're going to need for ground support. Don't beach the truck. When I say beaching the truck, that's pulling up into someone's front yard, setting up the outriggers. You don't know what type of soil or what's underneath that grass. Setting the truck uphill and downhill. Every manufacturer, everyone that builds a ladder truck is going to tell you that they want you to set uphill so that you're leaving the heaviest part of the truck as far as the engine, the cab, the transmission, the front axle, closest to the ground and not hanging it. So if you can, if you have big slopes around here, always try to set uphill. Plus it keeps the cab closer to the ground. So if you're an average height guy like me, you can get in and out of that cab still easily. The nice part is the way we designed and built your truck is you have outriggers in the front directly behind the cab. So if you do have to set up downhill, you can still work off the front of the truck and not have that teetering effect. Normally those front outriggers are behind the pump mod. And so you have all that weight forward from the pump mod, the cab, the engine, the axles, and the transmission. And if you extend the aerial out, you could potentially teeter. I've done it on purpose just to see what it feels like. It's not fun. It does stop once the front tires hit the ground. But at 70-some thousand pounds, teetering is not a good thing for any vehicle. So always try to set uphill if possible. You can set up downhill. Disadvantage of downhill, now the cab is a lot higher off the ground, of course. It's harder to get in and out of that cab. The rear compartments are closer to the ground, but the front, which normally we go in and out of sometimes quite a bit at the fire scene. Safety around the vehicle, exhaust fumes. If you have a air system in the bay, make sure it's working when you have the truck running. It does have the newest and latest, greatest DPF and regen stuff. The exhaust is pretty clean coming out of there, but still highly recommended that you have a ventilation system running if it's inside the bay. Cooling system, air intake. Basically here is, even if you're a mechanic, if you're not EVT certified, you shouldn't be turning wrenches on it that's going to cause potential issues as far as accidents, driving, you know, transmission issues. If you're certified and approved by your city to work on the fire truck, then that's okay. But if you're not, don't put wrenches to the truck because now you're liable for if something were to happen and people were to get injured. Undercarriage, covers, doors, once again, a lot of just common sense type stuff. If you're underneath the vehicle doing an inspection, make sure you put a tag on the ignition so no one starts the vehicle. It's never fun when you're underneath a truck with a 600 horse engine and it turns over right in front of you or above you. Let people know you're underneath there. If you're going to start the vehicle, always say fire in the hole or look underneath the vehicle before you start it to make sure there's no one underneath there. You have slam doors, of course, on the body and then the cab doors. Watch for the pinch points. Don't hang equipment off those doors, just like your personal car. We don't like our kids hanging on our doors. They're not designed for that, even though they're heavy duty. Tires and wheels, make sure you have proper air pressure. If you run over a curb or rub a curb, Make sure you inspect that tire when you get back to the station or to wherever the scene is, so make sure you didn't cut it, rip it, or tear tread off of it. You don't want to have damaged tires and have an accident with the 70,000-pound truck. Entering and exiting, once again, 3 points of contact, in and out, whether you're in and out of the cab, climbing up to the turntable, climbing the aerial up to the bucket. You see a lot of firefighters climb the aerial using the handrails to hold on to. The handrails are there to keep you within side, so you're actually supposed to use the rungs in front of you to climb the aerial if it's up at a high angle. Do not use pump fixtures or lights as steps. They're not rated at all for 100 pounds or even 80 pounds. They're either welded or they're mounted with 1024 or 1/4-inch bolts. Obviously, keep your boots clean, keep the vehicle clean. Walk on slip-resistant surfaces. I'm sure you have a SOP for spotters, right, for backing up the vehicle. Once again, we talk about vehicle control. Just like your personal car, it won't start unless it's in neutral, of course. Allow the starter to cool for 1 minute if it doesn't start within 15 seconds. If you're having issues starting or any issues, period, make sure you write it up in a report and get it to the proper officers or mechanics that you guys have here. You need to report it right away. The biggest thing with every vehicle you have out here is the inside of it, the controls, the switches are all different. So with this new truck, there's more up-to-date VMUX systems and switches. It's important that when I'm working with 2 or 3 firefighters at a time at the turntable, the rest of you in the cab, going through the VMUX systems, which runs your HVAC, your lighting, your interaxle lock, all that stuff. Look at where it's at, okay? Don't turn the siren on, because I know it works. The Q2B, the air horn. It's hard for me to do my job when there's lots of noise being done that doesn't need to be there. Don't need the generator to be running, and just don't turn the aerial PTO off, because that's what I'm here to do. So obviously play with it, familiarize yourself with the gauges and switches on board. If you have questions, let me know. But I'm going to concentrate today mainly on aerial operations, okay, because that's the big thing. Driving the vehicle, your overhang, just like your old truck, is directly in front of you. You got the bucket right there, so you're going to see potentially if you're going to hit something. Doesn't mean you still won't have tail swing in the rear to hit something in the back. If you think you're going to hit or get close to hitting, just have someone get out and spot you. You're never good when you show up to the fire scene and your bucket's hanging off the truck, or you sideswiped 5 cars on the way there. So get there in one piece, and you don't have to explain to the chiefs or anyone else why the truck's damaged. It'd be a long day. In the driver's seat, there's a switch that says platform tilt. Make sure that the platform is level when you come back into the station, or at least looking level to you. But when you pull out, if you want that platform tilted up, which you probably won't have to because it's on an 11-inch raised roof, so it's already up pretty high, to see the stoplights as you're going down the road. But most of the time that switch is there for flat roof style trucks where the bucket's really low into your vision for driving. Know your overall height. When you're in the driver's seat, there's a tag right above you that says your overall height, your overall length, all that. If you're going into unfamiliar territory, mutual aiding somewhere, pay attention to the low bridges that should be marked. This is in Pennsylvania, not my truck, thank God, but the fly section, this doesn't work with laser, is back here, and that should be way up front. So it's not only do you have to fix the truck, but now you have to inspect the bridge, and it's an expensive day. So, and with weight, this is another Pennsylvania thing. There's a mansion back there that's on fire, a homemade bridge that they had, not state certified or county certified. So be careful what you're driving over. If the bridge says 2-ton max, just because you're going to go faster doesn't mean you're going to still put more than 2 tons on it, okay? So do not drive over those bridges that are 2-ton, 10-ton type max situations. Angle of approach, you probably have some areas in the community where coming in and out of the strip malls or gas stations that could have angle of approach issues for the rear of the truck. The rear outriggers are the lowest part. The fuel tank's usually higher than the rear outriggers. If you think you're going to hit, first off, try to take it at an angle to get out of there instead of going straight through it. Have someone get out and spot you. Never go fast. Take it slow. Sometimes it does rub, but I don't know your whole area as far as angle of approach goes. Driving the vehicle, I mean, your truck is about 13 feet plus tall. I'll have the exact number here pretty soon. But you'll notice if you haven't driven it yet that it's like driving a big RV. You got a lot of weight above you. You got a 3-section steel aerial. So when you start taking those corners really hard, say at 30 miles an hour, which I wouldn't do, you're going to see an ABS light and an ATC light come on telling you that you're taking that corner too fast. It then records that, just so you know. Every time an engine light comes on, it's recorded. So if you were to get into an accident then they're going to look at how fast you were going, who had their seatbelts on, etc. So if you're the driver operator, you don't leave the apron until everyone is buckled in. And you'll know on your VMUX screen who's buckled in and who's not. If you have a faulty sensor, when you do your truck checks, make sure it's written down. Still buckle in because it'll still work. You could just have a bad seat sensor, or how far out the belt is, or if it's clicked, because it's looking for multiple things to give you the green light to go ahead and leave and shut the alarm off. A picture of your truck. So you have a 101-foot Cobra aerial. 101 feet is read at a 75-degree angle, fully extended from the ground to the top of the handrail. More important is what is your reach, and that's 94 feet at 0 degrees. Okay, so we'll get into that too a little later here, and I'll show you that on the load chart and the aerial screen. You have a 600 ISX Cummins engine, a water 2,000 gallon per minute pump, a 400 gallon water tank, 30 gallon foam tank, and a 6K Onan hydraulic generator. With the generator and aerial PTO, if you're this time of year, it gets dark very soon. So if you got a call and you're at 4:30 and you're still on standby, when you get to that scene, automatically just turn the generator on and turn the aerial PTO on, because if you're using your pump first and then you need to use the aerial, you have to idle back down to engage those two things. You can't engage your aerial PTO or your generator when you're above idle. You can push the button, but it won't happen. So think about the time of day, the call. Will you need the aerial? Will you need the generator for lights or cord reels? So activate those usually right when you get to the scene. It doesn't hurt for them just to be running. It's not going to hurt the truck. Cab tilt. So most important thing about tilting the cab is making sure that everything that's inside the cab that will potentially go through the window is pulled out. If you have a loose SCBA, it's easier to explain to an officer why it's on the ground, not with the window, than it is with the window. So if you feel uncomfortable, take it out. Then you don't have to explain why the window's missing. Flashlights, radios, if they're not secured properly, just take them out. Put them in a spot where they're going to be safe. You're going to tilt the aerial or lift the aerial to roughly 20 degrees. Shut the engine off. Leave the master power switch on. Go to your cab tilt controller and tilt the cab. Your cab tilt controller is right by the pump controls. It plugs right in. And you're going to tilt the cab until your yellow lock here, sorry, the laser don't work, hits the exposed portion of the lift cylinder. This is the driver's side of the vehicle, and I'll go through this today. There's one lock, but there's two lift cylinders. When you go to tilt the cab, you're going to tilt the cab until the lock hits the lift cylinder and stop. You're not going to lower the lock on top of the lift cylinder, you're just going to leave it. If you continue to lower the lock on there, or you were to, you could damage that lift cylinder because you're putting all that extra weight on there it doesn't need unless there's an issue. If there's hydraulic oil that's not being locked in that check valve and leaking somewhere, etc. But we'll go through this in detail. Also, the front bumper, the lid needs to be shut. No extra equipment that the truck didn't come to you with any mounted equipment on top of it, so it shouldn't have any equipment on there. You're going to see how close that cab gets to that lid. Driver's side pump panel. This is your cab tilt controller. So it's loose, probably inside by the driver's seat, somewhere under the seat usually is where most people keep it, but that's where it plugs into. Anti-electrocution platform. So this is right below the driver's side pump panel area. You pull that out. You use that anytime that you're working your power lines or if you have bad weather coming in. You want to be standing on that. You don't want to be touching the truck and be the ground of the truck if it hits the power lines or if a lightning strike hits the truck. Believe it or not, lightning does hit vehicles. We've had an aerial at the shop that got hit. It fried the entire electrical system. And see, it happened at a time of day where we weren't there, but you can go back to insurance companies, they can look at where lightning strikes happen and et cetera and get things figured out. But it's important that if you're working on this truck, you're the pump operator, bad weather or near power lines, you stand on this anti-electrocution platform. Or if you're an average height 5'8" and you just can't see, you stand on it anyways to get your body up higher. This is the officer side pump panel. Governor control, you guys should all know how to pump a truck here. Put it into pump. Electric primer. Drains, all the drains on all of our newer trucks are pull up and push down versus the quarter turn. We all have tried to open a quarter turn drain and it's like seized because it doesn't get used enough. Plus, we're stronger as humans to go up and down versus twisting with our wrist. They're all color coded and labeled. You're gonna see a couple different drains that say aerial discharge because you got two different valves. You got a valve at the back of the truck under the turntable and you got a valve at the pump. So when you drain your aerial, open all the drains that say aerial drains, and I'll show you where they're at today. Generator, back in the day, some of the older trucks, you'd actually use the breakers to turn your lights on and off. As we know, breakers are not designed for that. Just like your house, you don't use them to turn your lights on and off. If you have an issue with an outlet or a cord reel, let's say, if it's connected, double check, obviously, the plug that's on there or whatever the case is. Then go to your electrical panel here and see if it's been tripped. And then you have the, the frog meter, we call it, that gives you your frequencies and amps of that generator. Your generator was tested for over 4 hours straight at max capacity for UL, just like the fire pump was. So the fire pump was run for 4 hours straight at 2,000 gallons a minute. To start the vehicle, you have a master and ignition switch. So when you open up the driver's door, turn the master on, turn the ignition on, get yourself into the seat. By the time you're into the seat and buckled yourself, the needles have gone up and back down, hit start, you're ready to go. So open the door, ignition, or master ignition, go up, and hit start once you're in the seat. There's no wait to start, there's no glow plug warming. Guys, these newer trucks and engines don't have that. To stop the truck, to shut it off, ignition first, then master power. Do not leave ignition on and use master power as your main switch. What that does, and there's probably a mechanic back here, is that overloads your alternator. And that alternator is 230 amp plus, and they're very expensive. So ignition to shut off first, then master to start it, master, ignition, then start. Aerial inlet, this is on the driver's side front bumper. And then you have your auto eject and auto charge indicator right there behind the driver's door. Below the master's power and ignition is a kick plate that comes off. And behind that kick plate is a regen and regen inhibit switch, along with some engine diagnostics in your manuals. There's a plug there for your manuals, basically a USB. So do you have any vehicles out here that have DEF, regen stuff? So you're kind of used to understanding, some of the lights and the icons and what they mean. This sticker did come with the truck. I would put it somewhere where a driver can reference it in case they're curious as to what these icons or lights mean. But if you're driving the vehicle and you see this clean diesel particulate filter icon come on, and you look at the message center, it's going to tell you that it's going to need to go through a regen. If you continue to drive, it'll automatically kick in like an over-road semi. The thing is, we're usually going less than 5 miles or 10 miles in our territory, and we don't have time to continue to drive around and have a full regen at 30 mile or for 35 to 40 minutes. So you go to the scene, you put the pump in gear, you do your work, you come back here to the fire station, the light is still on. You park the truck out on the apron, make sure that on the exhaust side there's nothing around there that's going to melt. Park brake, wheel chocks. You then go back to this kick plate and you hit regen. You can only hit regen when it's asking for it, when it's telling you it needs to go through a regen. So when you hit that regen, the high idle is going to automatically come up. You're going to be about 1,500 to 1,800 RPMs. You're going to be over 1,800 degrees during that full regen. It could take 45 minutes to go through an entire full regen. Now, what if you get a call in between that? You release the park brake and you go. If the light is still on when you get done with that call, you restart. If it's off, park it back in the station. It kind of sucks for the fire side and ambulances. A lot of them are going back to gas because of that on the ambulance side. But urea has been added to the equation to reduce the amount of regens needed. I'll show you where that tank is. It's a 5-gallon tank, and there's 4 LED green lights right above the diesel fuel gauge. When you're down to 2 green LED lights, you can put one of those 2.5-gallon boxes in. It's perfect, just so you know. So a little trick there. If you open up one of those boxes, I don't know how you fill. If you have a tank or you guys buy boxes, that's kind of the smarter route to go. Is when you open a box, and you need to use the whole thing. Because if you leave it open to the air, you probably know this, it starts to crystallize. If those crystals get into that DEF system, it'll plug it and you'll have a lot of issues. So important that if you open a box, you must use the entire thing. If you got a little bit left, go find another truck around there to top it off if you can. So if the light comes on, it tells you that it gives you a message. You must put it through a regen. If you don't and keep passing the buck, eventually you're going to get a check engine light and you're going to get a stop engine light, and it's going to derate to roughly 25 miles an hour. We will then need to pull the entire filter out, and it could be up to, it's probably less expensive now, it used to be about 15 grand, but probably 5 to 10 grand to completely clean that filter and get it back into service. I don't know if you guys have ever pulled out filters and had to clean them, but
we've sent them out to get them.
yeah, it's not cheap. So it's very important that when you see an icon, if it's 2:30 in the morning, another scenario, 2:30 in the morning, don't park it on the apron and wake up the neighbors. Tell the next day crew or someone to come here, but as the driver, you're responsible to make sure that it gets done. So it doesn't come back to you, because I can plug my computer in and figure out when it came on, and if you keep track of who drives the trucks, I can figure out who was responsible for that. So 2:30 in the morning, don't do that. Ways to reduce regens, obviously the urea. When you're at a fire scene on standby or a car accident, high idle the truck. The hotter the engine, the less soot's built in that DPF filter, which means less regens. So the goal is to have less regens, because we don't have time to sit 45 minutes when we need one, unless you're going to reload and work on the truck. And that's why I say when you need it, instead of driving around the community, bring it back here. It allows you to take equipment out, reload it if you're at a fire scene while it's regenning. It will use roughly a quarter tank of fuel. So be ready to go get fuel afterwards. Below the driver's door, you have jumper studs in case you need to do any kind of PR work, or someone left the power on, you got to jump the vehicle. Use those studs if you're going to use jumper cables, whether it's for the truck itself or for helping someone out in the community. All your fluid checks except for the transmission are through the front grille. So you can check your oil, you can check your power steering, your windshield washer fluid fills there, and your coolant check and coolant fill is done through the front. On a 600 horse, on an ISX, the oil fill is at the engine. Cummins won't let us extend that all the way up to the front grille. So we work with them when we install and test engines in our cabs. Transmission, and you're probably familiar with this with Allison. They recommend in their manual, once the transmission's up to temperature, to use the shifter to check the oil level. So once you're up to temperature, 200 some degrees, this could be the last thing you do on your truck check after you drive it around, is neutral, park, brake, up and down arrow at the same time on the Allison shifter. It'll go through a countdown starting at 7. It'll say OL okay or OL with a number. That number is how many quarts low you are. There's still a dipstick, but that dipstick is in between and around the exhaust system. And remember, you got to check that when the engine's running. So it's a lot safer and recommended by Allison to use the shifter to check your transmission fluid level. And I'm not sure how it works here. Every fire station is a little different as far as what the fire department does versus the shop does as far as fluids go. This is a rough picture of the inside of the truck here. You can see there's a lot going on here. Starting on the left-hand side, you have your Allison shifter, you have your pump shift right there, your parking brake, the yellow knob. You have vents for your HVAC. In the center, you have your weather band radio, I call that. That's how you sell it to the city. You have your traffic advisor, siren, your fire comm or your headsets, and some USB and regular charging units, along with storage and cup holders for the coffee. Siren brake over on the right-hand side, of course, also. Mirror controls. There's a little round knob there by the traffic advisor. The nice part about the Havoc shields, you can move things around as if you don't like them after a couple of years where they're located. Just another picture there. You do have power windows on this truck. I'm sure you guys have realized that, the ones who've been driving it around. You have a 360 camera system. One important thing that to know is when you're going up to a fire scene, you know you're going to use the aerial. On the 360 camera, there is a black button. I wish this thing worked. You have the green one and the red one. You see that? In the middle is a black one, display view. You hit that once. On the 360 view, it puts red marks where the outriggers will land fully extended. So if you're pulling up to the scene and you got a lot of cars parked on both sides or an obstacle, you can turn that on ahead of time and know if you're going to have any obstruction with that outrigger, especially on the fire side. You always want to try to get the outriggers fully deployed on the fire side. You can short jack the opposite side if you need to. All right, now we're going to get more into the aerial side of things, the technical information. 4 outriggers with a jack spread of 17 feet 6 inches. That's fully deployed on each side from outside beam to outside beam, not the beauty stainless steel plate. You have a 500-pound wet tip load and a 1,000-pound dry. So that's 2 firefighters, they say, when it's flowing water, and 4 firefighters when it's not flowing water. We all know NFPA is the one that has this 250 per firefighter. When you put gear on, a lot of us are more than 250, okay? So just watch the load gauge. The load gauge and the tip loads are tested at the worst scenario. So that's fully extended 0 degrees. All right, and then if it's a 1,000-pound tip load, we test it to 1.5 times that. So if you're up high and you're not fully extended, you're actually going to have a better tip load. Elevation of -12 to a positive 75, 24,000 front end, Hendrickson parabolic, and a 63,000 Hendrickson Ultimax rear end. 13 feet 6 inches overall height. That's because of that little pre-connect up there. That's the highest point, just so you all know, is that pre-connect up there on the top of the platform. It does swivel. And you're 46 feet 7 inches overall length. Lots of warning labels everywhere on this truck. Anytime a firefighter gets hurt or there's an accident with a fire truck, we add another label. There's probably yellow tape on top of the truck. The yellow tape, because someone fell off a fire truck, is supposed to keep you from falling off the fire truck. So I hope it helps. Outrigger panel, the back of the truck. So once we've activated the aerial PTO, we're inside the driver's seat, VMUX on the home menu, second button down from the top, it says aerial PTO. You hit that button, it says aerial PTO engaged. It turns red also. One button, that's it. You'll also hear some beeping of the aerial activating. You go to the back of the truck, you're going to see this screen start up. It'll say Rosenbauer first. It's loading all the information. And then you'll be able to activate your outrigger switch from off to on. So once you activate your outrigger switch from off to on, you're going to have high idle and a backup alarm go off. You won't have high idle if the pump has been engaged already, because your throttle has full control of that, of the engine idle. So you activate that switch, then you're able to bring your outriggers out where you need them. And as you bring your outriggers out, you're also going to place your pads, of course, before you fully set them on the ground. Aerial and outrigger override switches. So right below the outrigger on-off is a switch that allows you to push up for aerial override or pull down for outrigger override. We'll use this today. I'll show you guys one of the last things we do is going to be aerial and outrigger overrides. Different scenarios from engines failing to transmission type deals happening, how you're going to be able to get the aerial put back into a driving position. The last switch on the bottom is your emergency backup electric pump. Okay, so that's the electric auxiliary pump. I'll show you where that's mounted when we lift the cab, just so you know what that component is. One important thing to know about that backup pump is if you run it for 5 minutes, you can run it for 5 minutes straight, but then it has to rest for 60. What I do is 2-minute intervals. 2 minutes on, 2 minutes off. Those short intervals, it doesn't heat up as bad. It's all about that little starter motor is what it looks like, heating up. So 2-minute intervals, I'll show you today what you can get done with 2 minutes. Now, if it's fully extended below grade, it's going to take a long, long time. If you ever have to use aerial overrides, we have a 1-800 number, and that's 24 hours, and it's actually the call center is here in Minnesota, and you're going to get someone you're going to be able to understand. And let us know so we can come help you. No matter what time of the day is, plus Jim's got my phone number, I guaranteed he'll call me. So there's other tricks that we can help that we don't help you guys to get that aerial out of a situation. The biggest thing is if it's up over a fire, the first thing you're going to do is get it away from the fire. Get everyone out of there that's going to potentially get hurt along with the truck. And then when you're done, we'll go back to the truck and get it put away. To activate the aerial PTO, neutral and park brake have to be applied. And then you can activate that PTO switch. If you leave the aerial PTO switch on and you go to release the park brake, it disengages the aerial PTO. Some of the older trucks out there, you actually had a process of neutral PTO back into drive. And if you did that process wrong, like pump shift, it was like grinding gears. So today there's a lot of safeties involved in that so you don't cause that damage. As the outriggers come out of as soon as the aerial PTO turns on, these lights actually flash. It's red and then a little scene light that shoots the bottom of the ground, letting people know that there's an object here. That object will win whether you hit it with a car or your body, so FYI. It's steel and it's very heavy duty. And then we get back into outrigger setup. So you turn the switch on, use your electric switches, which are all waterproof. Get the outriggers out to where you want them, then go place your pads. Place your pads so that the handles aren't in the outside walking way, either towards the rear of the truck, the front, or towards the body. If you have the handles out here, you just added one more trip hazard to the fire scene. We already have hoses everywhere. We already have SCBAs and all the other equipment out there. Let's reduce the trip hazards if we can. But get your outriggers out first, then place your pads. Because a lot of times I see guys throw pads first. Well, guess what? Now you have to go back and readjust it. You just wasted time. Time is valuable. So outriggers out, place your pads, lower them down, level the truck out. Don't level one side all the way up first, then the other. Make contact with the ground with all four, then level your vehicle out. Imagine setting up a crane every time you set this up, because it's very similar to that, except for it's a fire suppression type vehicle. So lowering your outriggers, bringing them out. As you bring your outriggers out on your outrigger menu, you're going to see these jacks turn different colors based off how far out the outrigger is. And I'll get into that on the hands-on side of it as far as short jacking and more of the screen and the options there, because I'm more of a hands-on learner like 90% of people are, versus having to try to explain it over a PowerPoint. But if you could always go back to this PowerPoint because it's left here for you to reference what does this icon mean, what does that mean. Safety pins, they're not needed to operate the aerial. They're there as a secondary safety in case the check valve were to fail. There's absolutely no reason at trainings the safety pins shouldn't be in. If you're going to a call where you have people hanging from balconies, get that aerial up as fast as you can and get to the pins a little later. Okay. Fire suppression, you have a surround and drown situation, there's no reason that the pins shouldn't be in because it's already probably lost. So think about what you're doing and what the call is, and remember, time's valuable. So if your crew can get up and get the aerial deployed, and the pump operator can go back and throw the pins in afterwards. We'll talk about the pins, where they're at, how to place them in. This is the outrigger menu on your aerial screen. There's multiple different menus. This automatically pops up when you activate the outrigger switch at the back of the truck. It tells you what your slope and grade is and how far out your outriggers are. So you know right away where to start leveling your vehicle. If you're on a slope, you always level the low side first, then your high side. Because if you do the high side first, then your low side, you may not have enough jack stroke left to get the truck level enough. And you're not looking to get it exactly 0-0, just within 5 degrees. Today we'll probably be a degree off or 2 degrees off, and most of the time you can't even tell with your eyes, but you can tell if you're more than 5, trust me, the whole truck's tilted. A couple other options that you guys have with this truck is auto jacks up, which is that green icon there, and then auto leveling. And I'll show you how those two work today. Auto leveling, you really need to be auto level, at least about 2 to 3 degrees. You may not see much happen on a level surface like out here. Today I'll purposely tilt it to the side to show you how that works. When you turn that switch on, and as soon as you touch your last outrigger to the ground, it'll automatically level the vehicle out. Once it's level, it shuts off. Okay, sometimes though it lifts the entire vehicle up. It's looking to get to 0-0. That's how auto leveling works. And you don't need to have all your tires hanging off the ground. You just need to have the weight off the suspension, the bubble out of the bottom of the tires. You guys know this from setting up your other truck. Auto jacks up. Pins are pulled, aerials put away, of course. Activate the outrigger switch. I turn that on. All 4 jacks come up evenly. So you're not having to bring one side up, then the other side up. It saves a lot of time. As soon as they're off the ground, you can start bringing them in. When that switch is activated, your lowering is disabled on your switches. So if you want to set the truck back up again, you got to shut that icon off, that switch off, and then it'll allow you to lower them back down with you.
The toggle on or off?
Yeah, it's just a push button. Just like you see here, just push that button right next to it. And at night, these are lit up. These little like orange circles here are lit up so you can see that it's actually a switch and it's a usable switch. On that menu also you have aerial hours and you have aerial temperature, oil temperature, okay, mainly for the service side. So we talked now about side-to-side slope, front to back. You can have within 5 degrees to work with. If you're more than 5 degrees, you're going to get a caution symbol, whether it's in the slope or grade. Will the aerial still deploy? Absolutely it will. It's just not as safe, because if you think about having the truck on a hill to the side and you deploy the aerial and you start rotating, I mean, you're going to be in that bucket all leaning to the left or right, depending on how it's set up. And don't use cribbing to try to level yourself out on a steep slope. We're not certified crane operators, and they have special cribbing. Don't use your cribbing you use for car accidents. Aerial meter we talked about. This goes through every little icon and obviously the hydraulic temperature. Switch is off is when it's gray, it's green when it's on. Very simple. Same with the auto leveling. Short jacking, that's all going to be hands-on outside, because for me to sit here and explain how short jacking works is going to be a little more difficult than to physically show you how it works. At the end of the day, basically you're allowed to bring the outrigger out, and not fully. You can be 50% out, 24% out, and still work on that side. Based off how far out the outrigger is on the short jack side will determine what your reach is. You'll always have 500 pounds wet and dry, but you won't have full extension because you're not fully deployed with that outrigger. So 16 times a second, we're looking at your tip load, your angle, your extension, all that. Outrigger, how far out it is, using CAN bus technology, which is in every vehicle that all you guys own, because if you have enough, most of us have vehicles newer 1996, and those are all CAN bus controlled. This is the home menu on the aerial screen. There's 3 aerial screens: outrigger, pedestal, and the platform bucket. They all show the same exact information. You can look at different menus on each one of them at different times. The only thing that the outrigger screen doesn't have down below is auto bedding, which is 20, and 23, which is rabbit and turtle. It's not an operating area, so there's no need to have the adjustments for speed or auto bedding. I don't want you to auto bed from there because you can't see the top of the truck. Someone could be up there filling the foam cell or whatever, hanging out up there, or they were told to sit up there because it's safer for them to be there than it is on the fire ground. So sometimes you just you got to be careful with that. So auto bedding can only be done at the platform, in the bucket, at the pedestal, and on the radio remote where you can step back and see the entire vehicle. I'm going to skip around. So 22, little Wi-Fi symbol, that's to activate your radio remote. If you want to use the radio remote, you turn that button on. You then turn your remote on. You're going to see caution symbols flashing from the radio remote icon and the E-stop, which is number 8, until you've hit enable on the radio remote. Then you're allowed to operate the radio remote. And when you're operating the radio remote, if you stop operating one of the aerial functions or outrigger functions for more than 8 seconds, it disables the remote and you have to re-hit enable. It's kind of a safety feature in case they're rescuing grandma and I'm talking to another guy in the fire ground and I were to bump the rotation. I don't want that to move. First off, if they're rescuing, the platform should have control, not the radio remote. The radio remote there is a secondary tool, short of staff, getting that aerial up and for water suppression type situations, not necessarily for rescuing out of a balcony. 21 is air horn. 19 is your breathing air. It always gives you the percentage of breathing air that's in there. We'll talk a little more about that and filling it up and how to fill it, where to fill it. 18 is your change hydraulic oil filter. 17 is your oil temperature. And 16 is your oil level. So you don't have to pull the dipstick out every month or every week to check the hydraulic oil level. All you have to do is turn the master switch on, ignition, aerial PTO, go to the back of the truck, look there. If it's green, it's good. You don't check hydraulic oil filter or oil level when the aerial's deployed or the outriggers are out because you've just pulled oil out of the system. So when you're operating the aerial, that might actually be orange. So you always check it for the green when it's fully retracted and in driving position. 14 is your outrigger not fully deployed. So if you are short jacked, that icon will be on. Or if your outriggers aren't deployed at all, it'll be on. If you're working on the short jack side and you've reached your limitations, you'll get a caution symbol over that letting you know that I stopped you because you're on the short jack side and you met your limitations. Your load gauge, we'll get into that here a little later, is number 15. And then 13, 12, 11, and 10 are all lights. So from warning lights, underneath the bucket lights, front scene lights, and rung lighting and base lights. Emergency stop, if there's 2 of them, or one at the pedestal and the bucket. If you hit one of them, it'll show on all the screens that one of the E-stops is pushed. Only use that for emergency. So if you're rotating and you're in the bucket, sometimes you get tunnel visioned into the rescue or the fire and you forget about the surrounding objects around you. There always should be someone at the turntable too when there's people in the bucket operating. They can hit that E-stop and stop you on a dime. They also can take their joystick and rotate you the opposite direction. The turntable operations pedestal has main control over every other operations that's on that truck. So it has main control over radio remote and then the bucket controls. And that's why it's important. Anytime there's firefighters in that bucket, there's someone on the turntable. You're more of a safety officer at that point. Number 7 are all your disabled icons. So if you're working too close to the cab or body, it'll automatically slow down and stop you before it hits anything protruding from the cab or body. If you have lights that are telescoping that go up, you will take them out, which I don't think we have on here. Everything's surface mounted. So some departments have those telescoping lights, and I don't program around them when they're in the up position because I just took a lot of your working angle away when you do that. So those can break like toothpicks. Gallon per minute PSI, that's letting you know what your gallon per minute and PSI is right out of the turntable. It's being read down there by the turntable, not at the tip. It's the home menu on the aerial screen. There's multiple menus. So to get from menu to menu, this larger circle here, there's an arrow. You can hit left or right, and it'll switch from menu to menu. So main menu, then it'll go to waterway menu, outrigger menu, load chart, engine information. So on the main menu, you have those letters there. Those letters will actually be live numbers, and they'll change as the aerial is moving. So A is the angle of the aerial, B is how high off the ground you are, C is how far out you are from the pivot point to the end of the aerial, D is how many feet are remaining of extension. That one might be the most important one when you're at a fire scene, knowing what you have left of extension when you're working at a fire scene, if you're curious, because sometimes it's really hard to tell at night, first off, and even during the day. And then E is rotation. If you're working with other firefighters showing them how to operate this and they're staring at the screen and operating, cover the screen, tell them to let go, and remind them when you're operating an aerial, you keep your eyes on the platform. Because you want to make sure you don't hit anything. That screen is there for information, like driving a car. We don't stare at our screens in our new vehicles when we drive. Otherwise, there'd be a lot more calls happening right now. This is a Tesla. That thing probably drives for you. So, flow meter, we talked about it. It's going to go through every icon and talk about basically everything I said. Rung alignment light, I didn't talk about that. That'll flash every time the rungs are aligned. Anytime a firefighter wants to climb the aerial, make sure that icon is on so that they have a nice, clean, safe walking all the way up and down. So dull gray is off, high beam signal is on. We use icons and not words or languages or paragraphs because at a fire scene we don't have time to sit there and read. Plus we sell to multiple different countries throughout the entire world, and to have every language would be very difficult. Platform warning lights. Platform warning lights do come on when you hit the E-master switch when you're going to the fire or rescue. You can then, when you have the aerial PTO on, you can turn them off or on if you're getting some reflection that you don't want. Outrigger not extended, and then caution symbol will be on when you're working on the short jack side, or one of your opposite outriggers may have come off the ground a little bit. And that might happen when you're working at a lower angle, fully extended. And you might see the opposite outrigger, one of them just start to come off the ground. As soon as if the other one were to start to lose any weight, it would stop controls, only let you retract and come near to the truck, not continue to go out any farther. Same with your overload alarm or load gauge. If that goes to red with a caution symbol and the horns emitting, it won't let you continue to rotate or go out any farther, only retract and come back towards the truck. So there's the load gauge. Obviously green indicates that it's safe. Yellow indicates, states caution, alerting the operator the load is getting closer to overload. When the icon goes to red, you're approximately 100 pounds less than the rated live load. So if it's a dry situation at roughly 900 pounds, that icon will come on, and then the caution symbol will be over it. When you're roughly 100 pounds over the triangle one, when you're roughly 100 pounds over the rated limit. So 1,100 pounds if it's dry, you'll have the triangle caution symbol with the horn that emits. And that horn's in the bucket, it's at the pedestal, and all that's going to do is draw attention to officers on the scene and ask what's going on. It could have been a water hammer, which we don't want. It could have been loading up patients type deal, or whatever the case is that it's sensitive. So to get yourself out of that situation, obviously have weight, someone either get out of the platform and walk their way down, or retract the aerial and get it closer to the truck. hydraulic tank level gauge, temperature, dirty filter. If the dirty filter icon comes on, the truck does not have to come on a service. Let the shop know. They can get an oil filter and replace it and done. And they're not a proprietary oil filter. You can literally match the codes and go to Napa or wherever you're going and get one. Breathing air at 20%, you'll get the caution symbol with the alarm going off. I don't know how do you have breathing air in your current truck? Okay, how do you guys hook up to it now? Do you keep a pack on and hook into it, or mask only? Pack, okay, so that's good. So you still have your bottle. Okay. Auto bedding switch. So you have auto bedding switch at the platform, at the pedestal, and the radio remote has one. So when you're within 20 degrees left and right of the cradle, center of the cradle, no more than 20 degrees above the cradle, and no more than 20% extended, roughly 10 feet, that icon on the lower left screen or menu, on the home menu, will come on. If that icon's not on, you can't auto bed. You're too far away from the cradle. I'm not going to let you auto bed 100 feet out because you're going to take every tree and power line and house with you, and it'll be a very expensive day. So if you can get the aerial out, you can put it away. So today I'll show you a group of you kind of how far away you can be, and then you can auto bed it. The radio remote doesn't have an icon, so you have to just get the aerial close to the cab, retract it most of the way, hold the switch, and you'll see it continue to retract, rotate, and set you in. You know the truck is completely stowed or put away when the aerial on the home menu, when it's back in the driving position. So when you're operating the aerial, the little truck on the home menu is up in the air, and then when it's completely stowed, it's in the driving position. You could hold down, you could do it manually too with the joystick. You have to be exactly at 0, 0. It takes you a lot longer. But if you have auto bedding, why wouldn't you use it? Because it's a lot faster. You will see that it doesn't put extra weight on that cradle. Like some of your older trucks, you'd have to put that weight down there so it didn't jump out of the cradle. Your cradle is also your oil reservoir. It's all one unit, so you don't have a separate tank somewhere else. Air horn, radio remote, I call it like the Wi-Fi symbol. Turtle rabbit for speeds. As you're operating with that joystick, if you are getting close to an object, roughly 5 feet, go from rabbit to turtle. It'll automatically cut the hydraulics in half and slow you down, so you're now creeping in versus full speed. Obviously, tether your control still with your joystick. These are some instructions and on your TFT controller. Now, you don't have the up, down, and flow on, off. This is their standard controller. So like on an engine, you would have potentially have an extending gun, and then you'd have an on-off valve. You do have oscillate, and obviously your straight stream, and the park. And I believe park has been programmed to where it is right now, probably in and off to the side down, of course, not out. So there is manuals that come with it to show you how do you want to set up oscillation. That would be like a major warehouse fire or something like that, where you just want to flow water left to right for a long period of time. The park button, obviously, when you hit that, it's going to park it back into wherever it was programmed. The red light right next to it will flash the entire time it's parking. There are 3 little toggle switches in the bucket when you open up the access door. That allows you to manually tilt the platform to like a pitch of the roof. I put them in there inside that door because it's something you don't want to play with every day. Most apartments don't adjust the tilt to the pitch of the roof. They usually just leave it and go right up to it and step off. This is one of those switches or areas where if you're playing with this, you could actually dump yourself out like a front end loader. So I would usually not, I'll show you guys where it's at, but everyday firefighter who's not very experienced, I wouldn't be showing them this, and they shouldn't be playing with it. Make sure it's left in auto. If you throw the switch to manual, it won't auto level, okay? If you're cleaning the bucket because you got debris under the heat shield, you could tilt it up or down and spray it out and get it all out. It's kind of a nice thing to do. The last menu on the aerial screen is your engine information tied directly to the J1939. If you're at a fire for about like 5-6 hours, just start paying attention to the fuel gauge. It's very embarrassing to run out of fuel at a fire scene. You'll get NAs if the truck's not running, because remember, it's tied directly to the engine. If you ever see a broken blue chain on any of the icons on the aerial screen, that is letting us know, as far as the service side goes, where to start diagnosing the issue. So if he's working on it, says I got a broken blue chain, you can call us, we can tell you, okay, go start here. We also have a service tool that plugs right in like a car, and that tells me exactly what's not communicating. So pluses and minuses to electronics is the newer electronics, you have computers to help you diagnose and get things fixed faster. Obviously, you have more electronics and sensors and switches and stuff like that, of course. But have you been to any of our service classes?
Yeah, I was signed up to take the one in June.
Oh, the one that got canceled,
yeah,
of course. So the next one you'll go to, of course.
Yeah,
So
I'm waiting for the next
good, good, good. Load chart. This is one of the menus on there also. On the load chart, it tells you your degrees and what your reach and height would be. Load evenly distributed with no water flowing. That's a big one for rescue, of course. So from -12 to 30 degrees, you can have 1,250 pounds evenly distributed throughout the aerial. I say roughly every 10 feet you got a firefighter or a patient or a person. No water at the tips, 1,000 pounds. Flowing water and load evenly distributed, not as common unless you're switching firefighters out, but I wouldn't drill on flowing water and having multiple people climb the aerial because you have that reaction with the water monitor. If they're playing with it, it's just a little more unsafe, okay? And then your tip load is 500 pounds while flowing water at the tip. It's not common to have 4 or 5 people in the bucket while you're flowing water at a fire scene, at least unless you want them up there because they're safer there than they are on the fire ground. To operate the aerial joystick, this is not a proprietary joystick. It's used in the heavy equipment industry. So you have a dead man, which is number 3. You squeeze that. You don't have to squeeze it so hard you're killing the chicken and your hands turning white. You just got to activate it. Sometimes you see guys' hands turning white and it's like, relax, just activate it. Pull back is raised, push down is lower, left is left, right is right. Very simple. To extend, you push forward with your thumb on number 1 and pull back, it would retract. So you can raise, rotate, and extend all at the same time with one hand. You can do multiple functions versus having 2 hands doing multiple functions, and you're always looking down, and it's a little harder for some people to do multiple functions. So it allows you to get the aerial up quicker to where you got to go. Very, very, very easy to operate. Breathing air, I will show you when we get out to the truck with the connection points from pedestal to the inside the platform. You're going to have to check with your vendor on your air packs and get the right couplings or take them off your old truck and put them on this one. I will go through on filling the bottle, where the fill is. You may have gotten a fill hose. If not, you probably already have one here, so it's not a big deal. And on the regulator, which is right next to the pedestal, it's right up here. It tells you on the regulator what to set it to. I think it's 125 PSI to give you enough air to breathe through and all that, etc. So, yeah. So there's your right and left gauge. So you have the pressure coming out of the tank, and then you have the regulator setting for your breathing air. We have parapet arms and Stokes basket arms. We'll go through this when we get the bucket to the ground today, how to set that up and how to use the parapet arms. The nice part is you have pockets on each side of the bucket. So based off how the truck is set up, you can take the parapet arms and move them to the right side or left side. There's a top and a bottom arm because there's locks for the rungs. So it's important that you have that set up properly. And you can see they're $250 a piece, $500 total for weight. This is nice for below grade stuff too, or going into a manhole. If you got to do a kind of rescue like that, you can use that setup. It's important also when you're setting this up, not to set it up over people standing below you or trucks. Get up over the building or preset it before you deploy the aerial up, because if you drop the ladder, someone's going to probably get hit or it's going to hit a truck or etc. So we'll go through the parapet arms setup when we get outside. We'll also go through the Stokes basket arms, which can stay on the bucket. Right now they're just folded into each other. They fold out. You can put your Stokes basket in there with a patient, and then there's also a spreader arm that goes through the bigger holes in the front that allows you to pull tools up or connect your harness to. If you want to do roof ventilation and be connected to the truck in case the roof collapses, at least you're not in the debris and you're hanging from the truck. So just a couple of different options that are there. So your radio remote not only operates the aerial, so these 2 larger joysticks are your aerial operations. So you have rotate on the right side and you have extend retract on the left side. Your right one also does your lower raise. So you could raise and rotate with that right joystick, and the left one is just your extend and retract. The 4 middle ones are your outriggers. Then you have your water monitor control, 13, 14, and 15. 12 is your auto bedding. You push that up to auto bed and you hold it the entire time. When you auto bed, you have to hold the button the entire time, because I know you'd get off the truck and then go do something else when you should be watching to make sure it's bedding properly. You have your rabbit turtle, which is 8, and 10 is obviously your e-stop and your on and off for the radio remote, and enable is 7. This thing runs on 2 AA batteries, so there's no chargeable $6,000 lithium battery, it's just AA's. It will automatically shut off if nothing's touched for more than 10 minutes, which is nice too, because sometimes we forget to shut things off. To operate the outriggers on this radio remote, you still have to activate the outrigger switch at the back of the truck along with having the radio remote turned on. And then it allows you to step back away from the truck and set the outriggers up if needed. I prefer to work right off the back of the truck and set them up myself. But it's another tool in the toolbox in case you need to. So.
No battery indicator?
There is a battery indicator on that screen, yes. That little screen there in number 11, a little battery indicator, your angle of the aerial, your rotation, your extension. If you're short jacked, where you're short jacked at, it tells you. Your load gauge is on there, it says load safe or unsafe. Breathing air is on there. So it's just scrolling through constant information. So a good question, I forgot to bring that up. Number 7, you have to hit reactivate after 8 seconds of not operating the aerial or outriggers.
Right.
That's the one that can get a little frustrating if you're not used to it. Like, God, why won't it work? Just tap enable once. You don't have to hold it, just hit it once. And then you have 8 seconds roughly to start operating whatever function you want to do. Flowing water. 2 ways to use your aerial to flow water is from the main fire pump through the aerial device, and from an external source to the aerial device. So I was wrong. On this truck, there is no valve under the turntable. You have one valve at the pump. Sometimes we have 2. So you could use that intake at the rear as a discharge. That is strictly an intake to the aerial, not an intake to the pump, intake to the aerial. So first scenario is we're going to use the truck's pump to flow water out the aerial. The cap stays on at the rear, okay? And the drains are closed. You get your water source in, you flow water out, the aerial. Now we're at a fire scene and we want to use the truck's pump for just our attack lines and have another water source for the aerial. NFPA recommends that. Everything's a recommendation from NFPA. In case you have a pump issue, you still have water flowing under the fire. So the other engine is supplying, or hydrant is supplying water through the aerial inlet at the back. So now you are in control, or not in control, but in communication with that other water source as to how much water you need and want. The fire pump in that truck no longer will give you that, the pump on the actual ladder truck. In order to have that happen, the valve at the pump panel has to be shut though if you're going to do your relay situation. So flowing water from the fire pump itself, remember the cap is on, drain is closed. You use this valve controller to get your water out the aerial. And there's presets. Most of the time on an aerial, that valve is opened all the way, okay? Because when you have a fire, and you usually want as much water as possible. But you can have presets or whatever you want there. It's allowable with the electric valve controller. It's important that after every fire scene of flowing water, the drains are open, and I usually leave the aerial drains open until I get back to the fire station, whether it's summer or winter. It's good practice because there's so much plumbing there. And if you don't let it all drain out, you will have an issue with our temperatures in the Midwest here. And that's it. So that's it of this PowerPoint.